I never thought a boat would be the thing that made me realize I was in love with a man. But there I was, standing on the dock in late September, watching Dylan sand the hull of a vessel he'd named after my mother, and something inside me just broke open. My mum had passed away 6 months earlier. Cancer, the kind that moves fast and doesn't give you time to prepare, even though everyone pretends you can prepare for something like that. I'd come back to our coastal town to settle her affairs, sell the house, tie up loose ends. I was supposed to stay 2 weeks. I'd been there almost 3 months. The day I met Dylan, I was walking past the boatyard, trying not to think about anything at all. That's what grief does to you. Makes you want to hollow yourself out. So there's no room for feelings to ambush you. But then I heard this sound. Rhythmic and somehow comforting. Wood being worked by someone who knew what they were doing. I stopped and looked through the fence. He was bent over the skeleton of a sailboat, his hands moving with this careful precision that made me forget to keep walking. He had dark hair that fell across his forehead, and even from a distance I could see the concentration on his face, like nothing existed except him and that wood. There was sawdust caught in his beard, and his forearms were tanned and strong, and I realized I'd been staring for probably too long. He looked up and caught me watching. Most people would have been annoyed or uncomfortable, but he just smiled, this easy, warm thing, and called out, "You looking for someone, or just appreciating the craftsmanship?" I should have walked away. Instead, I found myself opening the gate and walking into the boatyard. "Just walking," I said. I didn't mean to stare. "It's fine," he said, straightening up and wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'm Dylan. I own this place, or at least I'm slowly convincing the bank I do." "Read," I said, and when we shook hands, something passed between us that I immediately tried to ignore. His palm was calloused and warm, and he held on just a second longer than necessary. "You're staying at the Blue House on Maple Street," he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know that?" He laughed. "Small town. Everyone knows everything. Plus, your mum used to come by sometimes to watch me work. She said it reminded her of your grandfather. I didn't know that. There were so many things I didn't know about my mother's life here. All the small ways she'd filled her days while I was busy building a career in the city. Too busy to visit more than twice a year. The guilt of it sat in my chest like a stone. She never mentioned it, I said quietly. "She talked about you, though," Dylan said, and there was kindness in his voice. "She was really proud of you. The fancy marketing job, the apartment in Seattle. She showed me pictures once." I felt something crack inside me, and I had to look away. Dylan must have sensed it because he changed the subject quickly. "You know anything about boats?" "Absolutely nothing." "Perfect. Want to learn?" And that's how it started. I began showing up at the boatyard every morning. At first, I told myself it was just something to do, a way to fill the empty hours while I sorted through my mother's belongings. But pretty quickly, I had to admit I was going because of Dylan, because of the way he explained things with patient enthusiasm, his whole face lighting up when he talked about hull design or the properties of different woods, because of the way he made me coffee in the tiny office without asking how I took it, somehow just knowing I needed it black and strong, because being around him made the grief feel less like drowning and more like something I could carry. We fell into a rhythm. I'd arrive around 8, and we'd work together until early afternoon. He taught me how to use the tools, how to read wood grain, how to feel when something was right, just by running your hand over it. We didn't talk much while we worked, but the silence between us felt comfortable, like we'd known each other for years instead of weeks. It was during lunch breaks that we really talked. We'd sit on the dock with sandwiches from the deli down the street, our legs dangling over the water. And Dylan would tell me about growing up here, about learning the trade from his father, about the dream of building boats that would last generations. I told him about my life in Seattle, about the career I'd built that suddenly felt hollow, about how I didn't know who I was supposed to be, now that my mother was gone. "You don't have to be anyone," Dylan said one day, his shoulder warm against mine in the October sun. "You can just be." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and felt something shift in my chest. The way the light caught in his eyes, the gentle curve of his mouth, the sawdust still caught in his hair, even though we'd stopped working an hour ago. I wanted to reach out and brush it away. I wanted to know what his hair would feel like between my fingers. The thought startled me so much I had to look away. I'd had girlfriends. A few serious relationships. One that almost ended in marriage before she realized I was holding something back, though neither of us could name what it was. I'd never let myself think about men that way, or maybe I had, in the quiet moments late at night. But I'd always pushed those thoughts away, labeled them as something else, something that didn't count. But sitting there next to Dylan, I couldn't push it away anymore. That night, I lay in my mother's house, in my old childhood bedroom, and let myself think about it. About Dylan's hands on mine as he showed me how to hold a chisel. About his laugh, low and genuine. About the way my heart sped up when I saw his truck pull into the boatyard parking lot each morning. About how I'd started choosing my clothes more carefully, wondering what he'd think. I was 34 years old, and just now realizing I might be in love with a man. The timing felt absurd and perfect and terrifying all at once. The next day at the boatyard, I was hyper-aware of everything. Every time Dylan stood close to me, I felt it like electricity. When his hand brushed mine passing a tool, I nearly dropped it. He noticed. Of course he noticed. And I saw something flicker across his face that I couldn't quite read. "You okay?" he asked during our lunch break. "Yeah, just distracted," I said, which was the understatement of the century. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the water. Then he said, "Can I show you something?" He led me to the far corner of the boatyard, where a sailboat sat covered with a tarp. When he pulled the cover back, I caught my breath. She was beautiful, nearly finished. All clean lines and careful craftsmanship. And on her stern, in elegant letters, was a name. Catherine Rose. My mother's name. "Dylan," I whispered. "When did you—" "I started her about a year ago," he said softly. "Your mom used to come by every week, and we'd talk while I worked. She told me about your dad, how they used to sail together before he died. She said she missed the water, but couldn't bring herself to go out alone. I thought maybe if I built her a boat, something small and manageable, she could find that joy again." Tears were streaming down my face, and I didn't care. She never told me. She wanted it to be a surprise. I was supposed to finish it last spring, but then she got sick and... His voice cracked. I kept working on it anyway. Couldn't seem to stop. I guess I needed to finish it for her, even if she'd never get to sail it. I turned to him and saw that his eyes were wet too. Without thinking, I reached out and pulled him into a hug. He held me tight, and we stood there in the shadow of my mother's boat, both of us crying for the woman we'd lost, for the time we couldn't get back, for all the things left unsaid. When we finally pulled apart, Dylan kept his hands on my shoulders, looking at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Reed," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like something precious. "I need to tell you something." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Okay. I'm gay," he said simply. I don't usually lead with that, but I feel like I need you to know. And I need you to know that these past few weeks, having you here, they've meant something to me. More than just friendship. I know you're dealing with a lot, and I don't want to make things complicated. But I also can't pretend I don't feel what I feel. The world seemed to narrow down to just the two of us, standing there in the autumn sunlight with my mother's boat behind us. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my fingertips, in every part of me that was suddenly, vividly alive. I don't know what I am, I said, my voice shaking. I've only been with women. But Dylan, I can't stop thinking about you. I don't want to go back to Seattle. I don't want to be anywhere that you're not. And that terrifies me, because I don't know what it means. And I don't know if I'm any good at this. And I might mess it up completely. He smiled then, soft and hopeful. What if we just take it slow? No labels, no pressure. Just us, figuring it out together. I'd like that, I whispered. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. Can I kiss you? I nodded, not trusting my voice, and when his lips met mine, it felt like coming home. Like every kiss before this had been practice, preparation for this moment. His hand cupped the back of my neck, gentle and sure, and I melted into him, finally understanding what people meant when they talked about feeling complete. We took it slow, just like he promised. Our relationship unfolded in quiet moments, holding hands as we walked along the beach at sunset, falling asleep together on his couch while a movie played unwatched, learning the geography of each other's bodies with careful, reverent attention. He was patient with my uncertainty, never pushing, always letting me set the pace. I came out to my best friend from college over the phone, my hands shaking as I said the words. I'm seeing someone. His name is Dylan. There was a pause, and then she said, It's about damn time, Reed. I always wondered if you'd figure it out. Apparently, I'd been the last one to know. Coming out to myself was harder. There were moments of doubt, of wondering if I was just confused, if grief had scrambled my brain somehow. But then Dylan would smile at me over morning coffee, or I'd watch his hands work wood into something beautiful, or he'd kiss me goodnight with such tenderness it made my chest ache. And I knew. This was real. This was right. This was who I'd always been, just waiting for the right person to show me. We finished the boat together. It took another month of careful work, but finally she was ready for the water. We launched her on a cold November morning, just the two of us and a couple of Dylan's friends from the boatyard. As Catherine Rose slipped into the water for the first time, I felt my mother's presence so strongly, it took my breath away. I like to think she'd be happy about this, about me finding Dylan, about me finally being honest with myself. We took her out for her maiden voyage, just the two of us. Dylan handled the sails with easy competence while I sat in the cockpit, watching him, loving him so much, it felt like my heart might burst. The wind was perfect, and the boat moved through the water like she'd been born to it, like my mother's spirit was in every plank and joint. She's perfect, I called out over the sound of the wind and water. Dylan looked at me, his hair whipping around his face, his eyes bright with joy. Yeah, he said, she really is. But I knew he wasn't just talking about the boat. That night, lying in Dylan's bed with his arm around me and the sound of the ocean through the open window, I finally felt at peace. I'd sold my mother's house but decided not to go back to Seattle. Instead, I'd taken a job with a small marketing firm in town, something that paid enough to live on but didn't consume my soul. I'd moved into Dylan's place above the boatyard, a small apartment that smelled like wood shavings and coffee and felt more like home than anywhere I'd ever lived. "Thank you," I whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Dylan murmured, half asleep. "For building that boat. For being patient with me. For helping me find myself." He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my temple. "You did that yourself, Reed. I just gave you a safe place to land." But he was wrong about that. Dylan had given me so much more than a safe place. He'd given me permission to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be exactly who I was without apology. He'd shown me that love didn't have to look a certain way, that it could show up when you least expected it, in a boatyard, in a small coastal town, in the careful hands of a craftsman who saw something in me I'd been too afraid to see in myself. We still take Catherine Rose out every weekend when the weather's good. Sometimes we sail in comfortable silence, and sometimes we talk about everything and nothing. Dylan's teaching me to build boats now. Really build them. And I'm getting pretty good at it. We're planning to go into business together officially. Make the boatyard a proper partnership in every sense of the word. My friends from Seattle came to visit last month, and I introduced them to Dylan. They stayed for dinner, and afterward, one of them pulled me aside and said, "I've never seen you this happy. You're like a completely different person." But that's not quite right. I'm not different. I'm just, finally, fully myself. Sometimes I think about the path my life was on before, the trajectory I thought was inevitable, the corporate ladder, the right kind of relationship with the right kind of person, the carefully constructed identity that never quite fit. I think about how my mother's death, as devastating as it was, cracked me open in a way that let the light in, let Dylan in, let the truth in. I wish she could have met Dylan properly, could have seen what grew between us. But in a way, she made it possible. She brought me back here. She gave Dylan the idea for the boat that became the catalyst for everything. She told him about me, planted the seed of curiosity that made him look forward to meeting me. Even in death, she was taking care of me, guiding me toward the life I was meant to live. There's a photo of her in Dylan's office now, the one where she's laughing at something just off camera, her eyes bright with joy. Sometimes I catch Dylan looking at it with this soft expression, and he'll say, "I think she'd approve." And I always agree, because I know she would. My mother loved me too much to want me to live a lie, even if I hadn't known it was a lie, until I found the truth. Last week, a customer came into the boatyard and asked Dylan about Catherine Rose. She's become something of a local legend, this beautiful vessel that glides across the water like a dream. Dylan told the story of building her, of my mother's memory, of how she represents new beginnings and second chances. The customer asked if he'd build something similar for them, and Dylan looked at me, and I nodded. And we took on our first official commission as partners. We're building it together, side by side, our hands working in harmony, the way they've learned to do. Sometimes Dylan will catch my eye across the workshop and smile, and I'll feel that same flutter in my chest that I felt the first time I saw him, the first time he touched my hand, the first time he kissed me. I don't think that feeling will ever go away, and I hope it doesn't. I hope I spend the rest of my life feeling this way, grateful and surprised, and deeply, completely in love. At night, when we're lying in bed and Dylan's breathing has evened out into sleep, I sometimes whisper thank you into the darkness. Thank you to my mother for everything she gave me, including this final gift. Thank you to Dylan for his patience and his love and his willingness to wait while I found my way. Thank you to myself for finally being brave enough to see the truth and reach for it. The shipwright named his finest vessel after my mother, and in doing so, He gave me a map back to myself. Every time we sail her, every time I see her name painted in elegant script on her stern, I'm reminded that love comes in unexpected forms, that family is what we make it, that home isn't a place but a person who sees you and chooses you anyway. Dylan is my person. This life is my life, and I've never been more certain of anything.